We good? All right, my name's Noah Wistman, and thank you to all the people. All right, so person-centered planning, this was my project, specifically as it pertains to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, specifically the history, adoption, and effect in New York City, but a lot of what I'm going to talk about also applies to the country more broadly, but okay, focusing on New York City, we've only got so much time. How did I get interested in this? Well, as I mentioned, I worked in the field as my day job. This is my old beat-up ID card from 2019. I am using the same lanyard they gave me at orientation. So I wanted to start with just a really brief history of the conditions that were faced by people with intellectual and developmental disabilities from the mid-20th century and prior, really characterized by abuse, physical, sexual abuse, neglect, institutionalization, a real lack of understanding, a lack of research, very much an out of sight, out of mind kind of mentality. You want to go really further back, active persecution. But anyway, just focusing on the 20th century. And in New York City specifically, this was really brought to a head with the Willowbrook State School scandal. Willowbrook was an institution in Staten Island. It was supposed to be a school where people with disabilities could go to learn and improve themselves and things like that. But the institution was underfunded, was understaffed, was overcrowded, was unsanitary. There were disease outbreaks, malnourishment, physical, sexual abuse. And these conditions were known, but they were really brought to the public's attention by 1972 Geraldo Rivera special report for ABC. And this was really sort of a flashpoint moment for disability advocacy. A lot of the undercurrents got brought to the public attention. And you start to see a lot of reforms starting in the 1970s. Legislation, advocacy, funding all increasing. Those are just two of the examples. There are more. You also see a huge increase in the amount of psychological and medical research in the field. This becomes something that you can specialize in as a psychologist or a medical practitioner. And all of this brings in kind of a clinical treatment-based perspective to disability care. We went from neglect and out of sight, out of mind to these people have a disease and we're going to figure out how to treat it. And this perspective was definitely an improvement over what was before, but because the disease was being seen before the person, and the attitude was, we're going to decide how to treat you, it led to some issues. And one of the main issues that was controversial for a long time and is now just kind of like illegal, were the practice of aversive treatment procedures, wherein a behavior that was considered to be concerning or self-harming would be discouraged by shocks, restraints, or withholding desired items. It could be food, it could be a toy that someone liked. And this was done to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities pretty much exclusively without their consent and often actively against their protests and despite of their protests. And it was being done by people who were ostensibly trying to help. These were the medical practitioners, clinicians who wanted to improve conditions for people with disabilities, but because they saw their job as treating a disease, led them to these treatments, which obviously violated the people's human rights. Okay, then starting in the 1990s, you get this sort of beginning of this, I want to call it, is it an intellectual movement? It's some kind of movement towards the person-centered approach and person-centered planning. I believe the ideological roots can be traced to the psychologist Carl Rogers' client-centered therapy. This shift in perspective influenced a lot of fields of social work. I have some infographics from different fields. You see patient-centered care, client-centered therapy, including disability care, also elder care, medical care, and therapy. And it influenced policies, regulations, research, recommended practice. And fundamentally, the shift is a shift in perspective. Instead of experts, professionals, staff creating a plan and telling the person who's receiving the support what they're going to do, the person who's receiving support is asked, what would you like to do? What would you like to accomplish? What are your goals? What are your dreams? And staff's job is to support them in achieving those goals. That's the ideal. Does it always play out in practice? Well, it's case by case. So this is the theory specifically for person-centered planning. Person-centered planning can be seen as sort of an offshoot of the person-centered approach, specifically relating to making a plan, setting goals, and achieving those goals. In theory, the way this should work is that the person communicates their hopes, desires, and wishes to the staff, like I want to move out and live on my own. And the staff should work with the person in achieving those goals. Look for employment, take cooking lessons, practice budgeting, whatever it is. That's how it's supposed to work in theory. In practice, as you might imagine, a little more complicated. And as evidence of this, I took a screenshot from OPWDD's person-centered planning sort of guidance manual. And you can see that, oh, you can't see it. How do I see it? Anyway, it's like 1,500 pages long. It's like, I think 1,587 pages, which I'm convinced no one has actually read all the way. So, like a lot of things, it's a very good idea in theory, but when it comes to, government organizations, get sort of overly formalized, a lot of rules, a lot of regulations. So person-centered planning was really like a shift in perspective, fundamentally. And so when I was doing the research for this paper, I also had a sort of shift in perspective, and I wanted to sort of see person-centered planning from the perspective of employees who are being asked to bring person-centered planning into practice, out of theory and into practice. And when you think about it, person-centered planning places very heavy expectations on employees. Staff are expected to find creative solutions while also following regulations, while also adapting to new information, and always putting themselves second. By putting the person first, you're putting yourself second. And I believe that this is the right thing to do, but it's a very hard thing to do. Working with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, so many different kinds of people are under that umbrella. You might work with somebody who wants to do the exact same thing every day, and someone else who never wants to do the same thing ever. And these are both people with intellectual disabilities. It's a huge umbrella term, and you have to be ready for all those different kinds of people. You have to pursue vastly different goals, financial goals, artistic goals, personal goals, social goals. And some of the work can be emotionally stressful. You have to assist people. Often we'll have to assist people in the bathroom, changing adult diapers, cleaning up, assist people during meal times, and giving emotional support to people. And all of this is describing a very difficult, high-skilled job. It's one thing to say you should personalize services to every individual you work with. It's another thing to actually do it. It's very difficult. And this can be contrasted with people who work with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The sort of ground level employee role in the field is called the direct support professional. And this is a minimum wage or slightly above minimum wage kind of position. Minimal training is required, and minimal training is offered in my experience from organizations. And a lot of people work part-time. And these factors and other factors mean that there's a lot of people from marginalized groups working in the field: women, Black and Hispanic people, a lot of older people. This is a screenshot from OPWDD's page. You can see they know who their target demographic is. And I'm not trying to pick on them. They're not that bad, but and this is also related to, and this is true in the fields of social work in general, relatively high rates of mental health issues, a lot of times work-related due to the sort of stressful conditions. And, again, you can say this about people, social workers in general. These are people who are caring, they want to help, but they're overworked and often undervalued. And we saw that during the pandemic, the whole essential workers thing. You don't realize what you've got until it's gone. So this leads me to sort of my argument, which is that staff who work in the field need more support. Principles of person-centered planning are good, they're the right thing to do, but they place really heavy expectations on employees. And in the field, there's a relative lack of in-depth trainings, follow-ups, or rewards for improving at the jobs. And this can lead to shortcuts, lip service being paid to the regulations, box ticking, rather than really comprehensively trying to provide services. Again, no fault of the employees, they're just being asked to do something very difficult. So to provide better support for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, which is ultimately the goal, we need to make sure that people who work with them are getting the kind of support that they need. So that leads me to my public outreach project, which was to work with AHRC, continuing my day job there, to improve their employee trainings. And the timing worked out really well, because AHRC had already been sort of planning what they call the Level Up Training Initiative to sort of revamp their employee training systems. And I came in right as they were starting to put that into practice. I was able to contribute. So I did a whole bunch of work. I did research for them, helped edit the slides, helped come up with feedback forms. But the thing which I was sort of the most proud of is that I developed an in-person version of their person-centered planning training and led it. So now I have a video about that. It was an interview with my supervisor at AHRC, Bernadette.
What is the Level Up Initiative and why is it important?
So the Level Up Initiative is a training series, and it is designed for new hires to go through within the first 3 months of their hiring. So really it's introductory, and it is supposed to orient new hires to the role, to the department, to the agency, and their expectations and their responsibilities within their direct support professional role.
How is it different from what was being offered before?
So we found that the trainings in the past, when it was under Toolbox, it was more didactic. It wasn't as engaging as we think that it could have been. There wasn't as much experiential learning, which is something that we realized was really important for new hires and just veteran staff to really be exposed to. So really we wanted to reimagine it. We wanted to be more hands-on. And we just wanted to include more features that I think had the staff really perspective take and relate to their own lives. And that way, once they did that, it was a little easier for them to digest and conceptualize a lot of the topics that we were going over.
What has Noah been doing for the project?
Noah has been an incredible help. He actually came at a good time. So we had just revamped the training series, and we had conducted 2 rounds, and then Noah came in and he offered his expertise and his assistance. So I actually asked if he could help with the person-centered planning training, specifically how to turn that into a in-person training. Unfortunately, our Level Up training is all virtual, and that was because of the pandemic, obviously. However, we realized that something like person-centered planning and person-centered thinking is a very hands-on, direct type of topic. So I wanted Noah to develop, I guess, an in-person version of what we were already providing virtually. So that involved more group work and engagement, and honestly, not even a PowerPoint at this point. And I think I really love that idea from Noah, and I think it would increase a lot of engagement and just really interaction in person.
Why is it important to give trainings to people who work in ADS?
So for us, the role of a direct support professional is extremely complex, and there are a lot of skills, hands-on skills, but there's also just mentalities and mindsets that you sort of have to be in to be successful in a workplace like this. So ultimately, the goal of our agency is to provide supports for people to live the lives that they want, be happy, successful, comfortable. So really my purpose is to provide the trainings that help the staff create this environment for people to truly live their lives the way they want to. And at the end of the day, that's my whole goal, my whole mission.